Good afternoon. When I first stood before you in January for my fourth and final State of the State address, I shared with you my optimism for our state's future. I shared that I was optimistic that we could be role models for the next generation. I was optimistic that as Republicans and Democrats in Montana, we still work together to get things done. That when the rest of the nation fails to come together, we instead put our differences aside. And I was optimistic that we'd base our decisions not only on today's needs, but with an eye toward improving the Montana our kids and our grandkids, the future legislators and future governors will inherit. As an eternal optimist, I still carry that with me today. And it was proven out through this legislative session. In looking back on my fourth and final State of the State, dang near every proposal that I asked this legislative body to seriously consider will be making its way to my desk. I say this to underscore that the budget and policies that we pass this session truly are a reflection of the values of the Montanans we serve. It means we set out to do a good job for Montanans and that it was done right. The economic development tools created under Governor Roscoe that have helped over 15,000 small businesses expand their footprint and support more than 12,000 jobs, they'll continue to be made available for our small businesses and for the long-term strength of our economy. We've once again put a freeze on college tuition, preventing a tax increase on 28,000 Montana students and their families. We'll no longer be the only state in the nation that doesn't provide state-funded, need-based financial aid for students and adult learners. We have finally broken the logjam. Instead of passing on crumbling infrastructure to our kids, we'll put shovels to dirt and create good-paying jobs. We will invest in water, sewer, solid waste disposal, and bridges. We'll invest in the communities that have been substantially impacted. And finally, we'll make long overdue upgrades to Romney Hall at Montana State University, benefiting thousands of students well into the future. And we'll be sharing with visitors our culture and history through a new Montana Heritage Center. While other states around the nation have proposed the idea of outlawing foreign money from their state elections, they haven't actually gotten it done in recent years. Here in Montana, we have. And Montanans will now rest assured knowing that the source of spending flowing in to our elections, it's not coming from foreign countries. After 2 decades of trying, our firefighters can finally rest assured that their health care will cover job-related illnesses and that their families will be protected. We've taken the first and necessary steps in setting a foundation to report, investigate, and address the missing and murdered Indigenous women epidemic here in Montana. We're again providing funding to preserve our native languages, also preserving our culture and our rich history in Montana. And in 2 years, when the legislature convenes again, the flags of our tribal nations will be on permanent display on our state capitol grounds. Legislation that has in the past been a bargaining chip or a political bargaining chip instead came quickly to my desk this year with bipartisan support. This includes the pay plan for our public servants, our state employees, as well as the $77 million increase investment in our K-12 schools over the next 2 years. We've created a state reinsurance program that'll lower the cost of health insurance for Montanans on the individual marketplace by somewhere between 10 and 20%. And we've held accountable pharmacy benefit managers to help lower prescription drug costs for our Montanans. Through the reauthorization of Medicaid expansion, we're preserving access to physical and mental health care for nearly 1 in 10 of our state's population. And we're preserving so much more. We're preserving jobs, our economy, and our rural hospitals. We're giving access to care for our veterans who've certainly earned and deserved that care. Indian Health Service will be able to continue actually offering preventative care, not just life and limb care. And our businesses will continue to have an avenue to provide health coverage to their employees through Medicaid expansion. Of all the work accomplished, however, we do leave this session with missed opportunities. It's disappointing that after this legislative body had come together 2 years ago to make the first ever publicly funded investment in preschool for our 4-year-olds, we'll be saying goodbye to those gains. After 4 years of investment in preschool classrooms throughout the state through the Federal Preschool Development Grant, we'll also be saying goodbye to those gains. There's nearly 1,400 children across the state who won't be able to enter into a preschool classroom next year, who won't have the opportunity to build on the foundational skills needed to succeed in school and in life. There's nearly 100 classrooms around the state at risk. It's estimated that 11 school districts may have to eliminate their programs altogether. Up to 25 teachers and paraeducators in public schools could lose their jobs. 77 Head Start teachers could have their wages cut, and some may lose their jobs. I can well bet that the teachers who lose their jobs are disappointed, as are the parents who will have to quit their jobs and won't be able to participate in the workforce when left without a quality child care option. Quality preschool ought not be only for families who can afford it. I do call on our future leaders who will be in these Capitol hallways in 2 years to find a way to get a permanent, publicly funded preschool program done for the state once and for all. As legislators return home to their communities, my work of this session certainly is not yet done. There's currently almost 300 bills that have passed both chambers of the legislature but haven't been sent to my desk. There's millions of dollars in spending bills headed to my desk, spending with no revenue tied to it or way to pay for it, that will require me to veto to ensure our budget does not spend more than it takes in, and that we're left with a meaningful reserve for unseen circumstances. At the end of the day, I do think in Montana we continue to be a shining example of how our political system is supposed to work. We've once again demonstrated that we can put partisan politics aside and come together to do right by Montanans. We have demonstrated that government can make a meaningful and a positive impact in people's lives. I'm thankful for the legislators who put in the hard work day in and day out, and for those who made it not about political wins and losses, but instead about putting forth meaningful legislation and seeing it through to the end. I'm thankful for all the constituents and advocates who made their voices heard in this building, who held elected officials accountable, and who continued to ensure that we build upon the progress that we've made as a state over these past years. I walked into this session certainly hopeful and determined. Today I'm pleased to stand before you to share that same sentiment. I know that the work that we've done during this session will have a positive impact on Montana's future and certainly long beyond my time in office. Thanks so much. I'd be happy to answer almost any question. Questions?
Governor, a couple of bills you didn't mention. You mentioned, I think you believe Senate Bill 71, the pharmacy benefit manager. It sounds like they're going to sign that. There's a couple other ones that the Republican leaders mentioned, in particular the broadband tax abatement, and also Senate Bill 266, which is the investment credit for businesses hiring people. What are your feelings about those two bills?
Yeah, I think now that they're done, I have 300 bills that I have to sort through. And I have to look at them also to the extent that, I'll have 10 days when they're delivered. Hopefully now that on the way out of town, maybe they'll drop these 300 bills on my desk. I'll take a close look at them, as I will every bill, but I also have to make sure that we have a meaningful reserve.
When you're looking at those bills, what's the reserve, what's your target on that?
Well, I look at both. In looking at those bills or any other bills, I'll be looking at both the public policy implications and to ensure that we have enough money at the end.
So not a specific number?
No, sir.
With House Bill 715 and the access to the money that it was set aside, how do you feel like that ended up? Do you think it's in a place where you can access money?
Yes. Yeah, look, I mean, I came in with a target of $300 million reserve or access to $300 million. By the end of this, I don't think I'll be far off of that. I think that we end up in a place where I'm going to be able to manage, we will be able to manage the budget absent like a national calamity in a way that we won't have to see our legislators back here in the next 2 years.
I wanted to ask you about the Solutions Caucus, both on the House and Senate side. And as you and your staff work with the legislature, how much of your work are with the Republicans that fall into that area? How much are you reaching out to them to be able to get things done? Like when we're looking at the vote on Medicaid expansion, that kind of stuff. That seems to be where you're finding the support you need from Republicans. So how much do you work with them versus other Republicans that might fall outside of that group?
Well, I think I've at times worked or tried to work with some Republicans that it might surprise you that I tried to work with them. Certainly at the beginning of the session, I said that I'll work with anyone who fundamentally wants to make sure that we're moving public policy forward for Montanans. And at the end of the day, I mean, you can look at either vote tallies and others, but we all tried to work together to find ways through this. But I think that from that perspective, look, a lot of people come to the legislative session saying, how do we positively impact our communities back home? And just like as optimistic as I was at the beginning, I know I'm not going to get everything, but was more than happy to work with anybody that would take that perspective.
Over the last several days, you've never tried to get something done with preschool. Who were you talking to and what were, I think we heard, that it was leveraged against any rumor you want to throw out there, but what in the end fell apart?
Yeah, look, I told Montanans all throughout the session I wasn't going to give up on preschool. And that's I spoke to not just, I guess, your Solutions Caucus was speaking to all kinds of the Republican legislators. It didn't seem like they had an appetite to move anything forward.
I guess same question for any sort of Colstrip bill. I mean, was there ever something on the table that would have been acceptable to you, either in the bill or in discussions?
I think if the Republican majority still wanted to get something like that done, they wouldn't have Sine died. So that from that perspective, that did have some discussions, but I think that, I don't know if it's just springtime got a hold of them or others, but. Anything else? Well, thank you. I'll miss you.